Hey, Mrs. Harrison here to share with you another book. This one is called, can you see it? Just Mercy, A Story of Justice and Redemption by Bryan Stevenson. This is an adult book, but it would be great for upper schoolers to read. It wouldn't even be an eighth and up, certainly. I think even some seventh graders probably would be good at this. Sorry, my nose is running. It's cold out here. It is a New York Times bestseller. It is won all kinds of awards, and it is nonfiction. And it is the story of Bryan Stevenson, who is the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative. If you don't know about that, go look it up. They're doing some really great things, have been doing some really great things. And this is sort of his story of starting off as a young lawyer and trying to make change in the world. So he started off as a young lawyer and started working with inmates who were on death row and trying to grant them stays or appeals or ways that they could get off death row, and sometimes even retrying their case when he found out that they were innocent. So throughout the story, you get his journey of how things were going for him and how his initiative was going and all those kinds of things. But you also get the stories of all of these people that he meets who are on death row, women, men, all kinds of different people, sometimes people who were children when they were put on death row. And you also get other stories as well. What I love about this book is that, well, it's hard. I mean, and I don't mean it's hard to read. I mean, it is tiny print and there's a lot going on, but I mean, this is some hard stuff to ingest because he makes no bones about putting in our face the facts of what we do in America, in our prisons, with our poor, with our people of color, and the facts are harsh, okay? And as I said, I knew a lot of these things already from reading this, like before reading this book. I mean, I knew that people in prison were disproportionately people of color, particularly black men. But he has got some very real statistics that really put it in your face and make you really, really, really think. Aside from that, he's also giving you their personal stories, and you're finding out that so many of the people that we incarcerate are mentally ill, have addiction issues, had very, very, very awful childhoods that have essentially given them like the trauma from that has shaped them in terrible ways. Plus, there are a lot of people sitting in prison who are innocent or who are sitting in prison for a really long time for very, very, very small charges. So anyway, this is very interesting. So he tackles all of it. He talks about people of color, people who are poor who end up in prison more than other people. He talks about rigging juries, so people of color are not represented on juries. He talks about women and women who end up in prison for things like having a stillborn birth and then being charged with murder because of that, because they didn't go to the hospital, because they don't have any money for health care. The violence that happens to women and men in prison, rape, things like that. He talks about people who are mentally ill in prison who really probably committed a crime because they had received no help. He talks about the violence that happens in prison between prisoners and with guards and other things. He talks about people who commit a crime as a child when they're like 12 or 13, who then receive a life sentence for it, and that, our brains are not fully developed when we are 12 or 13, and usually the trauma that these children have experienced in their life create this mess that they're in. So it's really, really powerful book. I like the way that he writes because he tells the story in such a way that you really are just hearing people's stories. If you've read The Working Poor, it kind of reminds me of that. But it's a really powerful book, and it makes you really want to look at our system of justice and just our system of how we treat people in the world. But it really is about how if we are merciful, particularly to people who are most vulnerable, the people that need our help the most, that we can bring justice and hope and make the world a better place. Really powerful book. So glad that I read it. If you are a nonfiction person, it's a must. If you live in this world in America, it's a must for you to read at some point. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. So that's Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. As I said, a really hard read, not necessarily the words are hard. It flows very well because he's telling stories and you are really involved with the people that he's working with, and you you really want things to work out for them, but just hard because we have to face the realities of how we treat people. And, we often say that you can judge a society by how we treat our most vulnerable citizens. And this book shows us that we need to be judged because we are not treating our most vulnerable citizens very well. So I hope you read Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson.